This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Just for legal purposes, we're going to go ahead and record this as well. So our agenda is obviously to introduce yourselves, which I know we've got Marlene from Girls Inc., Dorothy from Campfire, and then we have, what is the name of your organization again? Diamond Hill Northside. I know it's a sports organization.
Diamond Hill Northside Youth Association.
Youth Association, great, thank you. This is a competitive grant opportunity for CYD. Again, today we will go over the high-level overview of RFA, the CYD grant and requirements. We'll highlight a few of the new requirements for existing service providers and then answer any questions that you may have at the end. But again, if you have questions as we're going through, please feel free to stop me. So types of funding sources. This is a competitive process for state and federal dollars. And we are working through Tarrant County Public Health, which is a county government. So again, we're making sure we're following all of those rules and protocols, which is why we are going through this legal process of the competitive procurement and this applicant webinar as well. But that's also why we have a lot of policies and procedures coming from the state, which is what we're reviewing today in order to obtain those funding sources. So general information, which you can find on page 2, the page numbers indicated at the top of each slide correlate with the RFA. So you can kind of follow along, or if you're reviewing this PowerPoint later, you'll know where this information is coming from throughout the RFA. So this is the Community Youth Development Grant from the Department of Family and Protective Services. Request for applications is for fiscal year 24. Which is a competitive grant opportunity for service providers. Our fiscal year is September the 1st through August 31st. Anticipated service award is $300,000 to $400,000 per fiscal year. We anticipate 5 to 7 awards. The range of the projected award amounts are $20,000 to $120,000 per fiscal year. And then the project period is for fiscal year 24, which starts September the 1st of 2023 through August 31st of 2024. We will not have another competitive procurement process for fiscal year 25. So the subcontracts that are awarded for fiscal year 24 through this competitive process that we're in now will be renewed for fiscal year 25 according to performance. So we will evaluate or reevaluate at that time and see if the programs are still viable for the next year, as well as look at your targets and funding amounts. But there will not be another competitive process for next year. It would be the following year. We do it every 2 years. The timetable, just a few highlights. Again, the full timetable is on page 5 of your RFA. So after this webinar, if there's additional questions that you have as you're going through the RFA and completing your documents, we will have questions, written questions due to me by April the 25th. I will then post the responses to the written questions on our website. It's the same website link that you found the RFA. That will be on April the 28th. Your letters of intent are due May the 9th. There is a specific exhibit for your letters of intent, so please complete that specific form. May the 25th, applications are due to CYD by 5 p.m. And we'll talk about the different options for submitting those, but that is, your applications are due May 25th. I am not allowed to accept them after 5 o'clock or at any later date. So please make sure they're submitted early or on time, and I will give you a receipt or acknowledge that they were received. June 20th through 30th, we'll begin our negotiations with selected subawardees. Subawardees will sign contracts August 7th through 9th. Commissioners Court will approve subcontracts August 22nd, and then September 1st, the contracted services will begin. So talking about CYD partners, DFPS, the PEI, which is the Prevention and Early Intervention Division, is the entity where we receive our funds and where I report to all of the information for our subawardees. Tarrant County is the grantee. So we, as Tarrant County and Tarrant County Public Health, receive the funds from Department of Family Protective Services. And I go through the same process that you're going through now, in that I do compile an application with all of the forms and submit those in order to receive the funding for our contract terms, which again, our contract term right now is for 5 years. So we're starting the 3rd year of that contract. And that being said, while it's on my mind, I want to mention to you all that are here today, some of the forms or exhibits that you will fill out for this application are really meant more for the grantee, which is the Tarrant County side of things. So if it doesn't really look like it fits sub-awards, that may be true, but we are still required to get all of the sub-awardees to sign those same forms and to submit all of the same information to make sure you meet all of the qualifications that we do as a grantee, and that is a grant requirement. So please excuse again if that doesn't seem totally applicable to you and your position, but we do still have the requirement from DFPS that you acknowledge those forms, you complete those forms, and sign them to attach to your contract. We also have you as subawardees, so Tarrant County ourselves, we do not provide any of the direct services to youth. We subcontract all of those services out. So that's what we're in the process here of doing. We also have our Community Collaborative Committee, which is a grant requirement that we have at least quarterly meetings to meet together collectively, to network, to share new ideas, to problem solve, to form community events, all of the above. And that is a requirement of the grant that we maintain that year after year. And then we have our Youth Advisory Committee, which is really our youth voice for the program. And they have several different roles that they play throughout CYD. And we'll talk about those more in depth in a few minutes. So those are our different CYD partners for the grant. The scope of the grant, it is a statewide program. It's been in existence over 28 years. It fosters safe spaces, positive relationships, and structured opportunities to build developmental assets and skills. These supports lead to strengthened connection, engagement, and contribution to your community. PEI has adopted a positive youth development approach for CYD to meet the goal of assisting communities and alleviating conditions in the family and community that lead to juvenile crime. This approach encompasses more than solely providing early intervention or prevention risk behaviors that lead to juvenile crime. It also builds skills, attributes, and developmental assets that are needed to prepare young people to grow into thriving adults. So talking about the scope of the grant, page 9 of the RFA, the service delivery area. Statewide, CYD is currently in 16 counties all across the state, multiple zip codes within those counties, but that's where we currently are. Our local Tarrant County CYD program serves zip code 76106, 76164, 76112, and 76119. So in your application, I need you to identify what zip codes you will be serving. It is not required that you serve all 4 zip codes, but definitely have the opportunity to serve kids in all 4 if you choose to. Applicant, again, like I just said, should identify zip codes to be served in your project work plan, which is Exhibit D. Available funding. Funding is contingent upon appropriations received from DFPS and the availability of funds from Tarrant County. This is a cost reimbursement grant. Match funds are not required, and subawardees shall not use funds from this contract to replace or substitute for existing funding from other sources. So the funding that you're requesting here needs to add to, provide a different activity or program. It needs to be above and beyond what you typically do, and the money needs to be used for something new or continue what you're already doing with CYD if you're an existing service provider. Program objectives. The goal of CYD is to support youth by fostering safe spaces, positive relationships, and structured opportunities to build assets and skills. These supports lead to strengthened connections, engagement, and contribution to the community, provide an array of positive youth development program opportunities to meet the DFPS goal to increase protective factors and developmental assets. Programs under this RFA must be intentionally designed and built to promote the growth of 40 developmental assets in youth. Applicants should link each program component to one or more of the 40 developmental assets. So that was new with our last contract. Those of you who are with CYD currently are familiar with that, but it's something I would like for you to revisit on your project work plan. And please use the new template that I have provided in your exhibits for this RFA, even though it does look similar, and it is similar. There were some changes that were made, especially with the formatting, so please use the new template. But also, now that you've been familiar with 40 developmental assets, most of you, or at least some of the staff members on the CYD grant, have taken the developmental assets training and are familiar with those assets, and you've seen your program work within those for the last year or two. Please make sure you revisit that and do highlight and identify all of the 40 developmental assets on your project work plan that are being used or obtained with each of your program components. So the eligible population, youth ages 6 to 17 who live in or attend school in the 4 identified zip codes. It doesn't have to be both, it can be either or. The target age range for youth is 10 to 17. Youth under 6 are not eligible for CYD, and youth served from ages 6 to 9 cannot exceed 30%. So the youth ages 10 to 17 need to represent at least 70% of the youth that you serve throughout the year, if not more. Youth who are currently on probation are not eligible, and that youth must exhibit at least 2 priority characteristics. And again, you can look at pages 13 and 14 of your RFA to review those eligible characteristics. CYD participation requirements. All participants must enter the program voluntarily. Subawardee cannot charge participants a fee for participation in the program or for any program participation related costs. And the point of that is that our grant funds are paying the cost of the program. So they do not want youth to be, or families to be charged a fee for participation. Subawardee must provide programming to families without regard to their economic status. Average number of unduplicated youth served monthly must meet the minimum established in the subaward. Subawardee can serve youth regardless of their involvement with CPS. And subawardees are not limited to serving only youth who are eligible for CYD services. Only services provided to registered and eligible youth will be reimbursed through CYD. So let's just say you're serving 50% of the kids are CYD eligible and registered and counting for our grant, and 50% are not, then we would just pay the expenses for the 50% that are, and then you would have to find additional funding to pay for the 50% who are not. But it is allowable for you to serve more than just CYD. We would just work out how we're going to bill for those accurately. So please review the applicant requirements on pages 15 through 22. It includes all of these different topics such as eligible applicants, organizational competence, staffing requirements and qualifications, training requirements, personnel files, financial requirements, billing requirements, and then indemnity and insurance. Now, training requirements I have highlighted here with a new comment or new requirement, and it's really, I'm hoping, going to make things a little easier for all of us, and especially me for having to track your training. But there's not going to be a specific number of training hours for each staff or volunteer required any longer. The requirement is that you will follow your training plan that you're laying out in your project work plan in your application, and then you implement all of those training requirements. So the trainings that are required, such as cultural humility, developmental assets, YPQA, youth development, those are all still required trainings, but I'm not going to have to, and you're not going to have to track each individual employee. Did they get 3 hours of this and 2 hours of that, and making sure your hours equal 12 at the end of the year. And what makes that difficult is when you have a lot of staff turnover, then what are their training hours, because they've only been here 1 month or 3 months or 6 months, you know. So really it's going to be more about CYD as a whole. We have offered the developmental assets, we've offered the cultural humility, we've offered the YPQA, and we're going to keep an attendance log of all of those who have attended. And then for those requirements like cultural humility, if they were not able to attend our CYD training, just like currently, they would need to take that required training on their own time. But there's no longer a 3-hour requirement. It can be 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. They just need to be making sure that they're receiving training on that topic. So whatever you put in your application for your training plan for project work plan, that will be monitored on a quarterly basis through your quarterly reports, and definitely when we come out to do our on-site audits, like I just finished with all of you, and then at the end of the year through your annual report. So we will still monitor training, but it won't be as rigid and counting number of hours as it has been in the past. Are there any questions about that? So CYD programming, pages 22 to 23, Tarrant County will fund CYD prevention services that are directly linked to juvenile delinquency prevention. Intervention services are not appropriate under the CYD model. To the greatest extent possible, services should be designed to appeal to those youth most vulnerable to juvenile delinquency. Services provided with CYD funding must meet the needs of the community and show how the service prevents juvenile delinquency and crime. So applicants may propose to provide required or ancillary CYD programming. Applicants may propose to provide one or more programs. So something again that's new, multiple subawardees may be selected to provide required CYD programming service types. YAC is the only service type that requires one subawardee to provide one advisory board of young leaders for the CYD program. So that's a shift really that DFPS made with our last contract, and really wanting to identify all the service types that each of your programs are providing. So there's multiple programs that are providing youth leadership development. There's multiple programs providing post-high school readiness. We don't have multiple programs providing mentoring currently, but we could. So it's not limited to just one provider for each required service type. The only one that we will have to really be selective on is the YAC, because that is intent is that service provider would have a larger YLD program that they're providing to the community, and out of those YLD groups, which is youth leadership development, out of those groups you would select a consistent group of 10 to 20 youth that will meet at least once a month collectively and be our governing board, so to speak, for CYD. So again, there's different requirements listed in the RFA that they would have to accomplish, such as electing officers, selecting at least one community service project to complete each month, participating in our review committee for our application process that we're going through now, providing surveys or interviews or focus groups for our community strengths and needs assessment, and then also participating in our statewide youth summit, which is every summer and is collective with all YAC groups around the state. So there's additional requirements that are put onto that YAC group. They're really the leaders of our CYD program, and there can just be one YAC group for our Tarrant County CYD collectively as a whole. Now, if you are not the YAC provider and you have youth leaders who would like to participate in YAC, I definitely encourage that. And that's really a big intent of the program, but it is not a requirement that every program refers youth to YAC. Dorothy, did you have a question?
Yes. So do we submit separate applications if we do both youth leadership and post-high school readiness? Do we submit separate applications, or do we just describe what we do in the proposal that we submit?
You will describe what you do in the proposal you submit. So
Okay.
you're just going to submit one application, and then if you're proposing different service types and different programming, then you would just make that clear in different paragraphs or however it's most easily understood throughout your project work plan.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so again, the required service types are mentoring, youth advisory committee, youth leadership development. If you are proposing to provide youth leadership development, you must include your YLD elements and your scope and sequence. So as you're digging through the application, you will find those additional questions and information that you'll need to complete, and then also high school readiness. So those are required service types. Ancillary programming is optional and selected to complement the CYD program. CYD programming must promote protective factors and are based on funding priorities identified in our needs assessment. So other service types that you are allowed to provide are youth-based curriculum class, family-based curriculum class, family-focused activity, sports and movement, arts and cultural enrichment, academic support, and service planning and coordination. And again, if you'll look on page 28, there will be specific definitions for each of those service types. And please do identify all of the service types that are applicable to your program descriptions. And that's something we will look at when we're doing negotiations, and something that I have to submit to DFPS for approval as well once we select our sub-awardees. So those things may change. We may, no, we really think this better fits under this service type. So don't feel like you have to be locked in, but definitely I want you in your application process to identify all of those service types you feel like are a good fit for the program that you're proposing. Family and primary caregiver engagement requirements. Parental involvement increases youth participation in after-school programs, influences constructive caregiver involvement in the home, and increases protective factors. You must outline your plan in Exhibit D, your project work plan, outlining anticipated strategies and timelines for implementation. At a minimum, one event held by each sub-awardee each quarter of the fiscal year. So again, if you're proposing multiple programs, you don't have to have a family engagement for every program that you're providing or every service type that you're providing, but just one per agency or one per sub-awardee you must provide at least every quarter. You will outline what that plan is in your project work plan in your application. And then if you're awarded and you're going through the year and you add to those, or you may have to change because of logistics or different reasons, then you would make those adjustments within your project work plan. But we do need a solid plan put in place that's realistic for your application. And collectively as a whole, our grant state requires that we have at least one per month. So if we have several service providers that are providing one per quarter, and then we as CYD collectively are providing, our vision awards and some of the other events throughout the year to involve family and caregivers, then we should collectively have at least one a month, which is our goal, our requirement from the state. And that can look however you want it to, or whatever's appropriate for your program. It could be parent advisory boards. It could be parents coming to one of your community service projects and volunteering and helping the kids. It could be an informational class. I know some of you provide like banking classes for parents or immigration informational classes for parents. If you want to have a parent forum and gather information and get their feedback on programming or issues their kids are having, whatever that looks like, it's fine. It just needs to involve parents and get them more involved in your program, and you're gathering information from them as well. So additional program requirements, we focus on out of school time programming. That doesn't mean you can't have groups in school. But obviously this grant wants to provide opportunities for youth to have something constructive and positive to do outside of school time as well. Each program component should directly link to one or more of the Search Institute's 40 developmental assets. There's a chart in your project work plan, and that's a requirement in the plan to identify those. Subawardee must provide programming each month of the fiscal year, including summer months. Youth may not participate solely in one-time activities. Now, that may happen, but that can't be the intent. So you can't just have one big community event and register 100 kids to come, and they come that one time, and then you never see them again. Again, that may happen with some of your activities, but the intent is that you are following up, you're encouraging them to continue with their program, you're offering opportunities for them to continue in your program, and it should be an ongoing program opportunity for each of those kids. And also going back to subawardee must provide programming each month. That doesn't mean every program is going to be exactly the same in the school year in the summer. There will be some changes because of just school year and summer activities and group site opportunities and different things that happen in each of those seasons. So it's okay for your program to look different in the school year and the summer. The point is that we can't have subawardees that only offer programming just for the school year and then they do nothing in the summer, or just in the summer and do nothing during the school year. It needs to be an ongoing program of some sort that you're offering throughout the whole year. And you can identify different participant goals or different outputs for, and we'll look at that in a minute, for school year and summer. So you need to make it clear what each of those terms will look like. Applicant must submit documentation of evidence-based research or information on each proposed program with a curriculum by completing Exhibit F, which is your evidence-based program ranking tool. So if the program you're proposing has curriculum or the program itself is evidence-based, you do need to complete Exhibit F. Additional program requirements continued. Applicant must ensure services are easily accessible to youth. If their group site is not in the community where they're able to get there easily, you will need to provide some type of transportation in order for them to access your services. Applicants must outline educational benefits of any planned field trips and how the field trips will align with the goals in your project work plan. Services are intended to be face-to-face in person. The FPS requires justification for any proposed virtual services. So again, virtual services are allowed if they're necessary, but please identify what those would need to be in your project work plan, and those would have to be approved by the FPS along with everything else we do. And then making sure your programs are culturally competent. So being that we are in a predominantly Spanish-speaking community, do you have staff and written information available to speak Spanish, or again, written information in Spanish for them to review and read? Are we meeting their needs culturally with all of the different things that we're providing in our program? Recruitment and outreach. Please make sure you have a specific program implementation plan for recruitment and outreach. If you're proposing to serve 100 kids, how are you going to get those 100 kids? And make sure that that plan is thorough and reasonable for what is going to happen. Participant case records. You are required to have an annual data authorization, which is our CYD registration form, every fiscal year. So the parent must sign, or you must receive some type of passive agreement from the parent that they are given permission for their child to participate in the program. As it was this last year, you are able to receive phone call permission or text or email, which is what I'm calling passive permission. So that is still allowed if you're not able to get a physical signature or a digital signature from the parent. And I know a lot of you are going to online registration forms, which are totally fine. Those are approved to use as long as they include all the information as well as the authorization statement that's on our CYD registration forms. Eligibility for program participation form must be completed with all new registrations. The surveys will be the developmental asset profile, the DAP surveys for pre and post for the 10 to 17-year-old youth. That is a grant requirement that each youth completes the pre and post each fiscal year. Document any additional pre and post assessment tools or surveys that you're using within your program on the project work plan. That is not a requirement that you do have additional evaluation tools, since the grant requires you to use the DAP surveys, but I know a lot of you do for curriculums or just different evaluation reasons within your organization. So if you do use those, please document that in your application in your project work plan. And then again, if you're selected for funding, you would report those results within your annual report. It's not something that I require or need on a monthly ongoing basis. You would just report the results in your annual report, just to make your program look better and show that it is evaluated and what those results were. Closures: youth who have not received services in over 90 days must be discharged from the program. If a youth returns, new registration forms must be obtained or signed before we're able to count them again for CYD. And then program experience surveys must be completed for all participants at closure. So that's not something that's done every fiscal year. It's just when the youth exits your program. And none of those things have changed. Those are all the same as they've been this last year. So target outputs and outcomes are listed on Exhibit D, your project work plan. You are going to propose the number of youth to be served annually. So even though it says an average on the template that the state has given us, this is not an average. This is the total number of youth that you're going to serve from September 1 through August 31. That's what you're setting as your goal of number of youth served annually for output number 1. Output number 2, you will propose the number of youth that you will serve monthly. That is an average throughout the school year. So if you know you're going to serve, you're going to be ramping up in the fall, you'll serve, fewer youth in September, that will grow in October and November and December throughout the school year. What it will be your average for the school year month. And that's not, as we do now, that's not the total of new kids, that's the number of kids total that you will serve each month during the school year. And similarly with output number 3, you serve during the summer. What will be your average for June, July, and August? The number of kids that you will serve total, not necessarily number of new kids, the number of kids total that you will serve through all of your programs. Now, if you're proposing to provide multiple programs, you're providing post-high school readiness, you're providing YAC, you're providing YLD, different programs, then just indicate, give me the total number, like in bold numbers. You can say, okay, we're going to serve 100 kids, but underneath that, you need to divide out, okay, we're going to serve 20 through, let's take Girls Inc. for instance. We'll take 20 through Girl Power and then 10 for YAC and 10 for YLD, or whatever those numbers are. You'll need to break it down so I'm clear on what program is serving what number of kids. And again, we'll talk about that more throughout your negotiation phase. But it needs to be clear what your plan is, how many kids you're serving for each service type. Any questions about that? Okay. So the others, your output number 4, youth will complete a program experience survey at discharge is 50%. All of these, as I've put here, are required by DFPS. So this is not anything we can change. These are not percentages that I've devised and come up with. This is the grant requirement from the state. So output 4 again, youth will complete the program experience survey at discharge is 50%. Output 5, youth will complete a matching DAP pre and post survey at 60%. Outcome 1, 10 to 17-year-old youth will not engage in delinquent behavior is 100%. Outcome 2, youth report positive outcomes in at least one domain of the program experience survey is 80%. And then outcome 3, Youth improve in at least one domain of the DAP pre and post survey, which is 75%. So you have percentages of youth to complete the surveys, and then you have your outcomes, which is percentages of youth who actually show that they improved or were satisfied of the program as well. So you want to make sure, which we'll talk about, more with your CYD orientation, is you're getting your program started. You want to make sure that you're providing a good environment for the survey completion. The youth are actually paying attention to what they're completing and know how to complete those surveys correctly, so that you will score well on those outcomes and not just outputs. All right, reporting requirements. You are, as usual, required to come to monthly desk reviews, and I've started doing all of those that are feasibly done in person, and coming to your organization to sit with you face to face, to go over all your reports, to talk about your program, to go over any successes or challenges or information that you may need from me. So that's a time for us to really go over your program and everything that you need and everything that's going on within the month. And you will submit all of the following during your desk review. So that's your monthly report, your monthly service tracking form, your attendance logs with staff verification, your individual group notes and materials, and your billing, your reimbursement request. And then at the end of the year, you do have an annual report that's due within 20 days at the end of the contract. And that's where you'll really show me how your program has shined throughout the year, show me all your great successes, any of those evaluations that you've done internally, you will report on those. And it's a good time for you as an organization to look back collectively over the year and, what did we do well? What did we maybe need to change for the next year? All of the above. In turn, I provide monitoring reviews, which include quarterly reports, and then also formal monitoring reviews that are conducted annually by myself and the Tarrant County Grant Auditor. For either one of those, if corrective action plans are needed for any goals or requirements that are met, then those will be submitted and then monitored through your monthly desk reviews and site visits and whatever needs to happen to make sure that you're meeting your goals and targets. Community Collaborative Committee, you can look at the goals on page 39. We meet at least once per quarter. All subawardees are required to have at least one staff member attend each meeting and participate fully. At least 2 YAC members are required to attend each meeting, and all subawardees are encouraged to bring outstanding youth leaders to meetings as appropriate. Now, sometimes we have adult-only CCC meetings really to incorporate more non-CYD providers so that we can get more participation and networking and program sharing ideas from other service providers that are not CYD funding. And then also, in turn, we have youth leadership community collaborative committee meetings like we did recently to plan our vision awards and our youth leadership workshops. They may want to come together and do some type of community service project throughout the year. So sometimes this format looks a little different, and I'll obviously make you aware throughout the year of what those requirements are and what those meetings will look like, and just making sure that you're participating in those to the fullest extent possible and involving youth as much as possible. It's a requirement from the state that we do involve at least 2 YAC youth, but I also encourage those of you who have youth leaders who would like to step up and take on that role and attend those meetings and help us with some of those collective activities to participate as well. So administrative info, pages 41 through 43. I'm your sole point of contact. Questions again are due April the 25th. Responses will be posted on the website April the 28th, and then your Exhibit S is your letter of intent, which is due May the 9th. Applications must be clear and legible, sequentially page numbered, and include the applicant's name on the top of each page, organized in the sequence outlined in the submission checklist, in Calibri font size 11 or larger for normal text, no less than size 10 for tables, graphs, and appendices. Blank forms provided in the exhibits must be used reproduction of the forms is acceptable. However, all forms must be identical to the original forms provided. Do not change the font used on the forms provided or the format. Again, I take a lot of time to format our forms correctly as much as possible, so please make sure you keep that format. And the exhibits that were posted on the website are in Word or Excel, whatever that original format is, so that you can easily complete those. And again, if you have issues or questions throughout that process, feel free to contact me and I can help you with it. Correctly identified with the funding opportunity title and submitted deadline, responsive to all RFA requirements, and signed by an authorized official in the place a signature is needed. So the deadline again, May the 25th, 5 o'clock. No applications will be accepted after this date and time. Just a note that I put here, which I've talked to some of you at your audits recently. If you're not familiar with and don't currently have Adobe Pro, I'm telling you it will greatly improve your life if you get Adobe Pro. And that's how you can combine all of these different exhibits and forms into one package. Because when you do use Adobe Pro, you can click on Combine, and you can combine Adobe documents, Excel documents, Word documents, all into the same document. And then also easily page number and put your organization name at the top. All of these requirements are easily executed through Adobe Pro. So your option number 1 for submission is that you email me your point of contact 2 files. One will be labeled your original application that contains the applicant's entire application and is searchable in that portable document format, PDF. And then in accordance with the Public Information Act, 1 file named Public Information Copy that contains the applicant's entire application, again in a searchable PDF if applicable. So you're going to submit 2 files that are exactly the same. Just one is original application and one is Public Information Copy. And those are just emailed to me by the deadline. Option number 2 is you can submit 2 USB drives, one labeled original, one labeled copy, and you can mail those to me or bring them to me in person. But each USB must contain 1 file named original application that contains the applicant's entire application in searchable format, as we just discussed. In accordance with the Public Information Act, you'll have a second one with Public Information Copy. So rather than emailing me 2 files, you'll have 2 separate USB drives. Again, you can use the Postal Service, overnight or express mail, or hand delivery to Tarrant County CYD, which the address is in the RFA. If you are mailing or hand delivered, it should be in a sealed box or envelope and clearly labeled the RFA name, CYD grant application deadline, May 25th, 2023 at 5 p.m., and then attention Jody Newton, which is myself. Any questions about that, about how to deliver your application? Okay. So your narrative application, again, page 48 goes through the details. You'll have Exhibit H, which is your executive summary, which is a 1-page high-level overview. You'll have Exhibit I, which is your program narrative, which are 4 or 5 questions that review your background and experience. The page limit on that is 15 pages, which is a lot for the number of questions, so you shouldn't have any trouble at all staying within that page limit. And then Exhibit D, your project work plan, which is your service delivery. There is not a page limit to your project work plan. It can be as long as it needs to be. Again, it may be long for those of you, especially that are proposing multiple programs. But you will also attach, attachment D1 is your WILD scope and sequence, if that is applicable to the program you're proposing. Attachment D2 is your PEI evidence-based ranking tool, again, if it's applicable to the program and curriculums that you're proposing. Attachment D3 is your agency org chart, which is applicable to everybody. That needs to be included for everybody. It's your agency organizational chart. Attachment D4 is your CYD program chart. So with the budget you're proposing, the project work plan that you're proposing, what does your CYD program organizational chart look like? And it doesn't necessarily have to just include the CYD paid positions. Please let it show the entire structure of your CYD program, from your president, CFO, whoever's going to, have authority over the program, supervision of the program, have their hands in the program in some way, needs to be indicated on your CYD program chart. And then attachment D5 is your CYD program descriptions. Now this can just be your CYD paid position. So the salary positions that you're putting in your budget have to have a job description attached to your project work plan. And then you need to make sure that the people that are filling those positions actually meet the requirement of your job description that you've put together for that position. Any questions about that? Okay, required application information. Exhibit K1 is your governmental entity information, or K2 is your nonprofit entity information. So you're not going to submit both, either your governmental or your nonprofit. You'll submit whichever one is applicable to your organization. Exhibit L is your administrative information. Exhibit G is your exceptions. That's one, if you don't have any exceptions, you don't have to submit. But if there are any, please submit them on that form. So applicant must execute and return all of the following listed exhibits. So execute means they have to be signed. So your appointing authority must sign these documents and they must be completed in full. So that's Exhibit A, your affirmations and grant opportunity acceptance. Exhibit J, your application information, applicant information, which is your face page. Exhibit M, which is your ICSQ for cost reimbursement grant, which is financial documentation. Exhibit N, which is your assurances, non-construction program. Exhibit O, certification regarding lobbying. Exhibit P is your expenditure proposal. That's going to be your budget that you're putting in Excel. And let me say, there are instructions on that tab. Again, most of y'all are familiar with the 2030, the expenditure proposal, but you'll have to fill out your proposed budget sheet, and those formulas will tie to the front sheet, your summary sheet that has to be signed. A lot of y'all ask questions, well, I can't fill out, these are all formulas, I can't fill out the summary sheet. You're not going to be able to. All of those numbers are tied to the proposed budget sheet. And please don't erase formulas. They're there for a reason. If you have a problem making your methodology fit the formula, let me know and I can help work through those issues with you. But please don't ever erase formulas or, start entering numbers on that summary sheet that aren't being tied to the proposed budget sheet, because that just causes issues. So please complete that as the form stands. And then Exhibit R is your compliance form. So those are the forms you have to sign. Again, we just talked about the expenditure proposal, which is Exhibit P. Proposal should include necessary expenses for the program, along with a narrative description of the methodology to calculate the cost. So please make sure on your budget form, under the methodology column, you are putting a description of whatever that cost will include, and then also a formula. So if it's office supplies, what is the formula to come up with the office supplies total amount? Or if it's a salary, is this staff person's salary or hourly? What is their monthly salary amount? How much of their time, what percentage of their time is going to be with CYD? How many employees is that going to be? Make sure all of that is very detailed. So in the end, if you're selected, we're not having to go back and do a lot of work to fix those things. Submission checklist is on page 54. Your grant application package must be completed and submitted in that exact order. So that will list the exact order of all of your exhibits, all of your forms, everything that needs to be submitted, and it needs to be submitted in that order. And that's really to make things easier, or really to allow our review committee to find the documents. If the exhibits and the documents are not in the right order and they're having to dig through and find it, that's going to be really difficult for them to give you credit for completion. So please make sure that they are all on that USB or all in that emailed PDF document in the right order, and everything's completed thoroughly to the best of your ability. So that concludes my presentation for our applicant webinar. Do any of y'all have any additional questions? Anything not make quite sense to you? Have you read through the RFA and come up with any other questions you'd like to ask today? Okay.
I don't have any questions. I appreciate all the information, Jody.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Good to see you today, and thank you to all of you for attending. I'm excited about starting a new year. I'm excited about the new proposals and the new programs that you will submit for throughout your application. I know we're coming off hard times with COVID and all of the different things that have happened, and I'm excited to start a new, let's just say, normal year and pray that nothing crazy happens. But I'm looking forward to bigger and better things with our program this next year, and I appreciate y'all's time and attendance today. Again, if you have additional questions, please email those to me, and I'm happy to help as usual in any way that I can. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day and afternoon.
Thanks, Jody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jody.